Good to see you.
And
Good to hear you.
yeah, finally to hear, right? Not just to
Mm.
see the picture. Yeah, I mean, I would prefer to say to call you Ebersol because we are also used to talk about Ebersol, not about the recordings, about the play-alongs, and very thrilled to have you and to hear your story and chat a little bit about about your way, your career in jazz. And maybe you can start off by talking a little bit about your musical background, how you came up with your family, and when you started making music, and have a nice chat.
Okay. Um, I'm 83, and I live about a block from where I was born down the street. Of course, I was born in the hospital, but I really stuck around the area. Unlike many jazz people, really grow up and then move away to a bigger city.
Hmm.
I started playing the piano when I was about 5 years old and took lessons for about 10 years. And I've still got,
I see the piano from here. Yeah, is it that piano?
yeah, I've still got some of my
Uh huh.
notes from my teacher and my, let's see, theory
Uh huh.
book, writing out answers and so forth. And I took lessons for about 5 years, and then she fired me. One day I went in to take a lesson and sit down and start to play, and she said, "Stop." And I saw her open her desk up, and she reached in with her hand and got the $2 and closed the desk, and I thought something was up. She gave me the money and she said, "You go on home, Jamie. You'll never be a musician. You don't want to practice." So I left and rode my bike home. Yeah. And then I started playing the banjo. My dad played banjo, tenor
Hmm.
banjo. I
Hmm.
took lessons on that in Louisville, which is about 5 miles from here. I rode the bus over. I was probably 10 or 11 or 12 years old. I'm very young to be riding a bus and carrying a big, heavy banjo in a big city. And then I took up the alto saxophone because my older brother played the sax, but he got fired from the high school band. The director told everybody to be there for the commencement at the end of the year when the kids graduate, and he said he couldn't make it because he was a senior Eagle Scout, had a meeting. So the band director told him not to come back. So he stopped playing the alto sax. I started playing the sax. And I played that through high school. And we started a little band called the Nighthawks. Had trumpet, saxophone. Sometimes they would have another sax. Sometimes we'd have a trombone. And we read these arrangements that I would buy for $1.25.
Hmm.
Big, thick arrangement. And then I went to college. But before I went to college, they suggested, somebody said, you need to play clarinet. So I went and bought a clarinet and took clarinet lessons and found it was quite difficult to play the clarinet. And I wanted to go to the Manhattan School of Music in New York because I'd been reading jazz magazines like Downbeat
Hmm.
and Metronome, and that's where everything was happening.
Yeah.
And I wrote to the Manhattan School of Music, who now they have probably 30 jazz teachers, but back then they didn't even recognize the saxophone as a legitimate instrument, so I couldn't go to New York. So I went to Indiana University, which is about 90 miles away, very large music school, but they didn't offer the saxophone either, and I didn't find that out till I got there. So they put me on a woodwind degree, and I had to take lessons over several years on the oboe, bassoon, flute, clarinet. In my second year, a fellow named Roger Pemberton from Evansville, Indiana, came to school, a woodwind player, on to get a graduate degree, and they allowed him to give me lessons on the saxophone. So I did that for 5.5 years, and my last two recitals were partially classical music, and the second half was jazz. So I was the first one to play jazz at maybe on a recital, maybe at any school in America. I don't know, but it was definitely the first for Indiana University. And we had a big crowd. The place was packed, and I was scared to death. I remember after the first one, which was my senior recital, um, I lived about a block away, and I always came into the music building from the front door. But after the recital, I came around to the back of the school to come in because I was afraid the dean of the school, if he saw me walk by his office, would say, "Jamie, come here. I need to talk to you. I understand you played jazz in our recital.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, I already had my answer. My answer was, I didn't ask to play. The teacher wanted me to do it. So that was how I got started. And then I got married, and then I moved back to New Albany, just up the street here, and gave private lessons and worked in my dad's florist and played jobs at night. And I played a lot of bass, upright bass,
Okay.
upright bass.
Mm-hmm.
And I taught myself how to play. So through the 60s and 70s and even into the 80s, I played a lot of bass on jobs, music jobs, and jazz jobs, in addition to saxophone. Then in 1967, I put out my first play-along record, the Volume 1, the LP, and the booklet. And
The
that
blue
kind of
one.
got me started in, yes, the blue one.
The blue one, yeah. I think we all have it. You don't have to show it.
Yeah. This one.
Yeah, I guess the line, yeah, it changed over the years, probably depending on the edition.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think we're talking about the same one.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the very first edition was just kind of paper-like, and then
Mm-hmm.
I put a little thicker cover on it.
Mm-hmm. This was
And we started
67.
out,
You just mentioned, right? 67.
yes,
And you started.
1967.
I mean, we can hopefully talk about that a bit later. But you started out in the garage, putting those things together by yourself before it became a big company, or?
Not a garage. I started out in my basement.
Mm-hmm.
I had we lived in my father. He had a couple apartments, and we lived in an apartment. And I worked at his floors today. And we'd put a big piano down in the basement of this apartment, and that was my studio for about 5 years. In 1967, yeah. And then 1967, we built this house that I'm in right now, and I've been here ever since. And I can remember students coming in to take a lesson, half-hour lesson or a 60-minute lesson, and I'd be over on the top of my piano with a piece of cardboard wrapping up one of these and sending it to somebody around the world back in 1967, 68, 69. Then we got up to about 1971, and we came out with Volume 2, the blues. And then Volume 3, the 251, and then we took off. Now, we haven't put anything out in a long time. I think our last volume was 133. That's enough. That's enough to keep you busy for a long time. And we had stereo separation on the LPs. The drums was on both channels. Let me get my drums was right and left, and the bass was on the left, and the piano was on the right. So if you had a bass player, they could turn that channel off, which we used to be able to do. Even on some of the Sony tape recorders, they had a pitch control, and I think they had a balance control too. But that disappeared after a while. Then after we got up to in the 80s, I guess late 80s, we started. Well, I don't know when, the 70s. Whenever cassettes came out, we went to cassettes and LPs, and both of them went along until in the 80s when CDs came out, and then we went to CDs, and that was much better because they were in tune. The cassettes were not always in tune, and some of the turntables were not in tune either. So that was kind of the journey we went through. The majority of them we recorded in my basement here with the piano, the bass, and the drum. Use this piano, and the bass player would be in the next room. We shut the doors, and we'd use headphones. And I'd sit over at my desk and count off the tempos. And after 5 or 6 choruses or 4 or 5 minutes, I'd say, "Okay, last chorus. Go to the coda. Here we go. Out." That was good. Thank you.
And you play piano on those recordings as well sometimes, right?
Yeah, I did play piano, and yes, some of them. Volume 3, I played bass on one track, G minor blues. And then Volume 24, Volume 21, Volume 54, Volume 84, Volume 16. Yeah, I play piano on a lot of them. just comping, no solos. Yeah.
Yeah. And when was the point when you realized that this will? I mean, did you realize that there will be one book after another, and it will be the catalog will be growing as it did?
Yeah. I would say I started in '67, and it took about 8 or 9 years to realize how important these were and how people really wanted to practice and play with these tools. So that was in about 1976. We came out with the Charlie Parker, Miles Davis, and Sonny Rollins. So that was a big deal. All of a sudden, we've got some of the most famous people who were still playing, very much alive, and now people can play the songs that they play when they go out and perform. And then that led to other people like Woody Shaw and David Baker, Herbie Hancock, Duke Ellington, Cannonball Adderley. There was one that was supposed to be Lee Konitz, but his wife messed that deal up. And then we got to volume 16, and that was turnaround cycles in 2/5. So we got into the pedagogical ones. Let's learn these scales. Let's learn these chord progressions and so forth. Then two Horace Silvers. Then we did Dave Liebman. Then we did Jimmy Radio on guitar. And then we went back to the scales, volume 21, getting it together, which was a much needed one. And then volume 24 was your major scales and your minor scales. And then we kind of left the pedagogical stuff for a long time. We did a whole lot of ballads, swing tunes, standards, we call them. Dove into hundreds of standards and other people along the way.
Yeah.
Cedar Walton, Benny Golson,
And
Brecker Brothers.
you were in touch with the artists when you focused on one in order to pick the right tunes or ask some questions if they would like that or
On some, yes.
on some.
But like the Miles Davis and the Sonny Rollins and the Charlie Parker, I think I just went through whoever controlled the print for the book and got a license to do that. But some of them, like Cedar Walton and some other ones, I talked to them, to get the cards and so forth and make sure everything was just the way they would do it if they played a job.
Right. Yeah. And I just read that also in the '60s you started those summer workshops. Can you talk a little bit about that? And was something comparable around at that time, like the Stan Kenton things, and was that the same era? I'm not sure about that.
Yes, it is. In about 1962, I think I was at the Notre Dame Jazz Festival with a quintet from Indiana University, and I won a scholarship to this camp for a week. And I guess I went to the camp. I really can't remember. I just can't remember. I had just gotten married, I know, so I went there, and then I think a year or two later, I would go to the camp say the camp was Sunday through Friday. I'd go up on Wednesday and just kind of hang out, go around. And at some point, the guy that was running it, his name was Ken Morris. And he was a drummer, but not really. He was a promoter, and he was also a gambler. He liked to gamble on horses. He liked to go to Las Vegas. He gambled. And he asked me if I'd like to join the faculty. And this was a big band camp. And I said, yes, I'd love to. So I did. And in '65, I started teaching. And I did that 65, 66, 67, 68, 69, 70, 71, 72, 73 maybe. And we traveled different places, different universities around the country, United States. Never went out of the country. I take that back. We went to Canada one time, or maybe two times. And along the way, this was a big band camp. So the students would come in and read big band charts, and there would only be a few people that would get to stand up and take a solo. And I convinced Ken Morris that we needed to have a combo camp where everybody that signed up, the bass players, the trombone players, the baritone sax players, the harpists, the violinists, the cellists, the flutes, the clarinets, everybody, whatever instrument came, they were going to play in a combo and learn how to improvise. And at the end of the week, they would all take a solo when their combo was presented. So we started that in, I think, 1972. And that went all the way up to 2019. That was my last one. So that was about, how many years was that? 50 years? 18, 19, 100, 112, 120. Well, was almost 50 years. Yeah.
And you started in your
Yeah.
20s and
But
with that, it's right. If I'm doing the math correctly, in your 20s, you started writing those books and
see,
teaching.
yes, it was all kind of combined together. And you mentioned Stan Kenton earlier. He and Ken Morris at one point in the early 70s, I think, they combined to have a camp together.
Mhm.
But for some reason, they didn't get along. So Stan Kenton did his own camp out west, and Ken Morris continued on with me and a bunch of other people.
Mhm.
So there was something happened. I don't know what.
But those summer workshops, they were the Jamie Ebersold uh,
Oh,
kind of thing,
not
or
not in,
no?
no,
Not in the beginning.
not until about 1992 when
Okay.
Ken Morris got out of. He wanted to sell it to me, but I didn't know what I was buying. You know, I don't know. So he
Mhm.
just sort of disappeared. Then I think he died, and I took over, and we changed the name, and my wife did all the book work,
Mhm.
and we did that for 8, 9 years.
Mhm.
Me and my wife running it and doing all the paperwork, and I've still got the boxes of all the applications where people sign stuff, and I've also got the books with all the people's names. And it's
Mhm.
interesting when I look way back there in the 80s, 70s, and 80s at the names of some of these young boys, primarily males, who came to the camp. Very famous people came to. You see their name and you see them today. They're still alive and still playing jazz.
That's one of my
And they came to
questions
the
that I
camp.
would that I'm interested. If some of those kids, what are the names of some of those kids we are familiar these days?
Yeah. Well, Chris Potter is one of them.
Mhm.
I'm trying to think now. I can't think. I can see people's faces, but I
Will
can't
come to
see
you.
their names.
Yeah.
Uh,
Mhm.
but a lot of people. I
Mhm.
need my book to look at it. There's plenty of people, and a
Uh-huh.
lot of them ended up playing professionally and teaching in colleges.
Mhm.
So that started change as they came into the teaching field. It started to change the way jazz was taught and thought about and so forth. You know,
Mhm.
let me show you something. Way back there, I saw the need at these camps to have pass out material. So I would print and staple together packets
Mhm.
of information. And then we finally got to where we did this.
Yeah, I know this one. Yeah.
And this
Mhm.
is all online. You go to
Mhm.
jazzbooks.com and it says free items. You go over there. This and other stuff is there for free.
Mhm.
Also, I've been
Quite. Wow. Yeah. I quit while you were ahead. Mhm.
help people stop smoking. I've printed about 50,000 of those smoking books and given them out. And I'm down to about my last 20 books. It's helped a lot of people over here in the United States to quit. That book is also online. So if anybody is watching this and wants to quit smoking, just go there and ask for you can print out
Quit
the
easy.
Quit Easy book.
Mhm.
It's a big help.
Very cool.
Yeah, so the jazz camps, the play alongs, and this book here with
Mhm.
theoretical information and so forth, has gone all over the world. There's probably not a country that it hasn't been to where people and this jazz handbook oftentimes is the teacher for people in other countries that don't have a teacher.
Mhm.
And they may be the only person in their town that's ever heard of jazz, and they're trying to play their guitar or their saxophone or trumpet or whatever. And this gives them a lot of information.
Important resource. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Yes.
What I would like to know is how it developed, or maybe it is still the same. I mean, I guess in the beginning you sent, you got an order, you sent out the book, you wrote another book, but I mean, it's the catalog is so huge. Can you tell how big the company is? Is it 2 people or 200 people that is dealing with all those play-alongs and books and marketing and advertising and sending them around? Um,
It's it's a big business.
mhm.
There's about there's two, three part-time people
Okay.
and three full-time people, and we still
Mhm.
send stuff every day. all over the world.
Hmm.
I was going to say something. Oh, along the way back there at the camps, Jerry Coker put out a book called Patterns for Jazz, which
Hmm.
is still one of the best books to practice from. He gives you a pattern, he writes it out on about three keys, and then he gives you the key signature. Like he writes it out in C, then he writes it out in C sharp, and he writes it out in D. And then he puts just a symbol for E flat, E, F, F sharp, on up, and you're supposed to, by ear, figure it out. That's one of the best books. And along the way, he asked me at the camp, this would be way back in the early 70s, Jamie, could you sell my book at the camp? You're selling your play alongs, volume 1, 2, and 3, and 4. How
Hmm.
about so? We took that. Long story short, now we probably sell several thousand books by other people that
Hmm.
are published by Alfred and Hal Leonard and other people. And we've got them stacked up all around the basement here, and they're all alphabetized. We've got two big orders we're working on right now. One of them is going to go to London. Faber. Have you heard of Faber? Faber music.
Yeah, I read about, yeah, but I'm not familiar with.
Yeah,
Mhm.
they distribute all over Europe,
Okay.
and we're sending a big order to them in London, and then they
Mhm.
distribute it out to music stores and so forth.
You said
But we
six
have,
six guys are working for you. Is that what I understood, more or less?
yeah, about three are part time,
Uh-huh.
and three are full time. Four are for part
And
time.
this
I mean,
is,
four are.
yeah, just a
It's
room full of
confusing.
people. I mean, yeah, I can imagine. So, but you guys, is that your home or is that your office or both together? Where the place you're in now, the studio,
Say it again.
the studio there
Yeah,
that you're
this
in
is
now.
it. Yeah,
This
this
is
is it.
this is your, yeah. This is your office, your practice room, your.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm. I see. And the guys are working in your house in another flat or in another
Uh,
room or.
we there were two working in the house, and one of
Uh-huh.
them's worked for me for about 43 years.
Mm.
And Kendall, I think you saw him. He's been working about 3 years. He
Hmm.
does the orders, and the other guy that's been working with me for over 40 years, 2 years ago, he has bronchitis, and when COVID hit, he thought he needed to go home.
Mm.
And my wife and I are both 80. She's 82 and I'm 83. And he was afraid of COVID getting it and maybe giving it to us. So he's been working from home. He comes in once a week
Uh-huh.
and does what he needs to do, but everything's done from home. And then
Hmm.
Kendall comes in 5 days a week, does the orders, answers the phone, answers emails, and so forth. And I'm just doing all kinds of stuff over and over.
Hmm.
And then we've got a guy that works from home from about 11 years now. He designs the books, and he's kind of our tech guy.
Hmm.
And we have another tech guy who, when we need him, we call him. And then we have a lady that worked for me for 20 years, I think, and she puts in about 5 or 10 hours a week from home.
Hmm.
So we got,
Small group,
and let's
but
see, one,
yeah.
yeah, I think three of the main people
Hmm.
all started out here at New Albany High School, about 3 blocks from my house. They were going to school, and I asked a teacher to ask in her classes, would anybody like to work after school? And one, two, three of them did, and they're still working for me.
Hmm.
One of them's been here about 43 years. The other one's been here about 20, and the other one's been here maybe 25. So once they come, they work, and then they kind of learn the business.
Hmm. Yeah, they stayed a long time. That's a sign too for some things. Yeah. Mhm.
Mhm.
And
I also go ahead.
I want to ask, during all those years, you played at night some gigs and were teaching during the day, writing another book, all kind of simultaneously.
Yeah. Uh,
Yeah.
when I was in college, my senior year, getting ready to go to graduate school for a year and a half, I started teaching privately at a town about 50 miles away from Indiana University on Saturday. Flute lessons, clarinet lessons, and sax lessons. And
Mhm.
I'd never done that before. But I found out I liked it, and I was good at it. I had good ears, I could hear. So I did that. I did that for a long time. I did that
Mhm.
for 20 or 30 years,
Mhm.
teaching privately. Um, and then from that, I got to play an upright bass. That's what it was. At the music store, they had a bass, And I asked him how much he wanted. He said $100. Pay him $10 a week. So I learned to play bass. And then I started playing bass on jobs. So I would be in the morning at 9 o'clock, I'd be over at my dad's florist, work till noon, take a break for lunch. And I just lived across the street in an apartment. Then I'd come back and work till 4 o'clock, maybe 5 o'clock, eat supper, and then go play a job with my bass or maybe saxophone at a hotel and a restaurant. And that was my daily life. Oh, and then teach. No, I'd come home about 3 o'clock and teach 3 or 4 lessons to students who just got out of school, 3 or 4 30-minute lessons. So I was working in the florist. I'd just gotten married. I was playing bass at night or sax, and I was teaching after school. So I was busy. And that went on to the 70s, 80s. The job slowed down in the 90s because I couldn't stand the cigarette smoke, and I thought it was hurting my health. So I started only playing jobs where there was no smoke or it was outside. And then for the last 20 years or so, I've been doing basically working here, practicing, playing, still putting out some play-alongs back in the early 20s, and playing jobs occasionally, once a week or so, playing usually alto. I don't play bass on jobs anymore. We usually jam in here right where we are on Wednesdays from 10 to 12. Got several bass players that like to play, several piano players, and several drummers. So we always have a quartet, usually on Wednesday, just playing, and I record it on my CD, and then I make a copy for them. But we're still working and trying to improve our art form.
So nice, yeah. You're in full swing still, and no signs of slowing down. It seems you're full of energy and healthy and.
Not really. Yeah. I've got pretty good health. My right eye got hit 30 years ago playing basketball. And about 5 years ago, I had to stop playing basketball because I ruined my right shoulder shooting hook shots.
Slam dunking too much.
Yeah, right. No dunking. No. I love watching NBA basketball. Have you heard of Steph Curry?
No, I'm not into the games, but.
Not into the game. Okay, well, he's a super person and a fantastic role model for young kids who are getting into sports and big sports.
Okay.
I had tomorrow I've got a lesson. Fellas come down. He's going to college in a couple of weeks, and he plays upright bass. I'm anxious to get together with him and see where he's at and how I can help him in an hour or two's time. There's a sax player, a couple of sax players come for lessons, not too many. Recently, I've done something different. There's a middle school, that's grades 5, 6, 7. Grades 5, 6, 7, so that would be what, 9, 10, 11, something like that. And this band director had 115 new students coming into her band who have never played an instrument before. So I got hold of a local music store, and they had had 25 band instruments, including a snare drum, that they sold to me at a very cheap price, and I donated them to the school to get these kids going. So that's something I'm into right now. I'm anxious to get kids playing music. I'm sure you hear things about America. The guns are everywhere, it seems, and the killing is going on every day. It's incredible, unbelievable. So I'm trying to work with kids, getting them into bands, playing music. We're not really talking about jazz. We're just talking about playing an instrument,
making music,
staying out of trouble. Yeah, making music and staying out of trouble.
Yeah, what a nice thing. I mean, they don't have band directors and bands anymore. I mean, to a little degree that they can choose an instrument in school, and one afternoon they have in class.
Yeah, they do.
They do, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. But some of the kids don't have the money to buy an instrument or to rent. Right. To rent an instrument is probably $25 to $35 a month. So that's an extra couple $100 or whatever over the course of a year. So I'm trying to find more instruments that I can donate to these programs.
Hmm. And we talked about your Swiss roots. Maybe we can refresh that knowledge, because I
Yeah,
checked with my colleague, but he thinks he's from a different family tree or something like that. But I was
uh,
really surprised when we talked about about
yeah,
the shape of the head that I and
right.
he's
Very.
playing clarinet, and I mean it's so funny that we came across that. So
There may be a connection way back there.
I'm sure there is somewhere. I mean,
Have you heard of? You've heard of Dave Brubeck,
of course.
the piano player? Well, I found out that if things had been just a little bit different, he would have been born right here in New Albany.
Hmm.
His grandfather lived here, and he had a son, which was Dave's father. And when Dave's father was 19 years old, his father, Dave's grandfather, gave him $100 bill and a horse and told him to go to California. So this was back in the 1800s. So I guess he rode the horse to California, which is a long way. And Dave was born in California. But
Okay.
otherwise, Dave Brubeck, the famous Dave Brubeck, would have been born right here in New Albany. Of course, he may not have been famous either. You know.
Well, we don't know. Yeah,
Yeah,
interesting.
genealogy is interesting. But I do have that postcard that somebody sent me, and
Hmm.
he was on a trip in Germany, and it said Abersold that way and another town that way, and a map. He took a
Hmm.
picture of a road sign.
Hmm.
So there's a road sign somewhere that has Abersold on it, spelled just like us.
Yeah, it really sounded familiar because I have that colleague from when I studied music. He was an Ebersol too, but yeah,
Yeah.
not in
Uh,
association with the play-alongs and things like that. But mhm.
can I play something on my saxophone?
Please do, yeah. I love that room you have. It's full of
Yeah.
music
But
and pictures and LPs and CDs and
oh,
piano, and
well, look at the ceiling.
even the ceiling is covered.
Yeah.
Man,
I got thousands and thousands of
a big
photographs.
universe there.
I've got
Hmm.
them in.
And when you give clinics,
Trying to.
so when you did clinics like the summer workshops and things, you would perform with a band, or you would show something on the horn, and then the kids had to do it backwards, or
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. We
Hmm.
every night. Every night there would be three faculty groups that would play,
Hmm.
and then there would be student jam sessions after that. And we would have as many as 40 combos, all rehearsing at the same time. Um, no low B. That's kind of a
Sounds
Bach
beautiful.
thing I'm just making up. So that was a blues.
Right.
I'm surprised it'll even play.
Great jobs.
There's a
Yeah,
little
beautiful.
sax, early morning sax.
Yeah.
Well, mid morning.
Sounded gorgeous. Thank you so much.
So,
Yeah.
so you play clarinet and what else? Bassoon?
No, 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 no. Bass clarinet.
Oh, bass clarinet.
Yeah,
Yeah.
only clarinet,
So
bass clarinet.
you've heard Chris Potter
Playing what?
play bass clarinet?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
I think his high school band director had him play bass clarinet because he was so proficient on the saxophone. She didn't have anything for him to do, so she put
Hmm.
him over on the bass clarinet, and that's how he got started on that.
Hmm.
He's very popular, fantastic. Someone asked me years ago, a student at a camp, said, "Do you think Chris Potter, CP, is maybe the reincarnation of Charlie Parker, CP?" And I said, could be, because he sure plays well.
Yeah, there's more than enough talent around anywhere. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
But yeah, I mean, such a help that, I mean, those resources, the books that he put together and the play-alongs. I mean, such a, was it something that you thought, well, I need this, but it's not around, so I will do it by myself? Was that somehow?
I didn't understand that.
Was that the motivation that you thought, I'm here alone practicing, but I would like to have a play along, a CD? I need,
Oh, yeah,
where is it nowhere written down? I'll do it by myself
yeah.
and put it out. Was that the reason?
I'm looking for my original motivation.
I'm sure you remember.
I've got it right here. Well, I don't see it, and I'm a little concerned right now because it should be right there. Oh, wait a minute, here it is. I see it.
It's a written statement, or
Here's my original.
oh, yeah, that looks great. Jive and swing. Hmm.
And it was a little,
Uh-huh. Hmm. Vinyl.
and I think it has piano, guitar, bass, and drums.
Hmm.
And and then here's the other one.
Play or sing. NBC rhythm section record. Yeah. Mr. Sandman, Bring Me a Dream.
Yeah,
Hmm.
you remember? I can remember. I
I
remember
remember,
playing
you
that
know
on the
what?
piano.
I remember the Mills Brothers singing that tune.
Yes, yes.
Vo-
And I
voiced out
remember playing
nicely.
that on the. I remember playing that on the piano and thinking it was one of the nicest things I'd ever heard. We, you know, a week and a half ago, I played that tune with my quintet,
Hmm.
keyboard, guitar, bass, drums, and me. And we played Mr. Sandman for the audience. About 175 older folk sitting in
Hmm.
their lawn chairs. It was a bandstand out on a park. Very nice. I said, this tune got me started way back there. I love this song, Mr. Sandman, in addition to many, many others.
Yeah, I would love to hear it more often too these days, especially
Yeah.
those.
So that little play long record there gave me the inspiration to make my own.
Hmm.
Uh, my dad, when I was in the probably 6 or 7 years old, no, sixth or seventh grade, so I was probably what, 12 years old. He bought a reel-to-reel Duquesne tape recorder, reel-to-reel, and at the same time they bought a Hammond organ, the two manuals,
Hmm.
two keyboards, big
Hmm.
organ. They bought that when I was 12 years old. And I learned to play it. And I learned to walk bass lines and play chords. And I would tape record myself. And I have those tapes here somewhere. And I had a guy put them on CD. But I played tunes, blues and F, blues and B flat. I remember doing Lazy Bird by John Coltrane,
Mm-hmm.
Moment's Notice, I think, and other tunes on the tape. And I took that tape recorder and the tape to Indiana University with me, and I kept it up there for 4 or 5 years and would take it upstairs and practice with it, those tapes over and over. So that was my original play-alongs. Mm-hmm. And somewhere I've got them here in my room.
So you played the bass with the left hand and the chords with the right hand?
Yeah.
Yeah, I see. And what about the drums?
Yeah.
Nice.
I had
I think I have that tape too at home.
Yeah. A vibes player came in yesterday. He's 69 years old. It took him forever to set up the vibes in my room here. I mean, it took him 45 minutes. Heavy stuff. But anyhow, I spent an hour and a half walking bass lines and playing through Autumn Leaves, Summertime, Watermelon Man, Satin Doll, about 4 or 5 tunes. And he was just practicing, learning to improvise. And the main thing we were working on was to have him sing what he played. Mm-hmm. From here to the mallets, because he was just rambling up and down the keyboard or the vibes and didn't make any sense. So by the time we got through an hour and a half later, he finally said, "I'm out of gas. I have to stop." I was ready to go.
And you were still walking the bass and playing the chords like before?
Yes, walking the bass. Yeah, over and over and over. And I did that for 30 years for students. Mm-hmm. So I think now that I'm talking about it, I think that's an important part of my teaching, but also the students that I had contact with. That is, instead of them just playing their trumpet, or if they were far enough along and they wanted to take jazz lessons, trumpet, maybe trombone, sax, definitely sax, flute, clarinet, because I was a woodwind player. But they would be playing their scales and things, and while they're playing their scales, I'm playing the I'm playing the background music on the piano. Mm-hmm. Chords in the right hand, and if it's a bossa nova, the root and fifth in the left hand. In other words, mm-hmm. they can hear their notes against the harmony. And as we're talking about this now, I realize how important that was to all of these people that took lessons from me. Because if they were listening, they could hear their melody against harmony.
Yeah, I mean,
and it was easy to hear. It was easy to hear if what they were playing matched or if they hit a wrong note. It made it stand out much more so than if they were just playing a single line.
Right, compared to those teachers who just listen to the student and never play by themselves. Mm-hmm. Would be the other.
Yeah.
Would be the other example. They heard how their note fits into the harmony that you were accompanying them, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. My piano teacher fired me, and then the next year there was a talent show in town, and she had some of her piano students there, and I played the banjo and I sang Slowpoke. You keep me waiting till it's getting aggravating. You're a slowpoke. La, 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 do. And I won $2. But anyhow, she fired me from playing the piano, and I started playing the banjo and singing. Okay, and I did that for quite a while, 3 or 4 or 5 years. But what she didn't know, and I didn't know at the time either, was that I was going to use the piano in my career more than the saxophone or the clarinet or the flute or any other instrument, or the bass. I was using it to teach all the time. Mm-hmm. I've never really taken a job on piano because I can't really solo. I can solo, but it's not very good. But I sure use it to point out ear training to people and
Mm-hmm.
voicings and 2-5-1s and turnarounds and harmonic motion and just to play through tunes and stuff. The piano is a master instrument, so I'm really grateful that I started out on piano, even though I didn't continue it as my career. Had she had me way back there when I was 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, had she had me improvising, playing simple chords in the left hand and soloing in the right hand, I would never have had to move over to banjo or piano or clarinet or flute or oboe or bassoon or bass or guitar. I would have stuck with the piano.
You would still play
But I just,
exclusively the
yeah,
piano. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And I guess you were invited to a lot of times to go to give a clinic by yourself, just talk to the students. Is
yeah.
that something that you did in colleges, universities, jazz departments?
I've given hundreds of clinics,
Mm-hmm.
and I really enjoyed doing them. The first one I think I ever really did was up in Wisconsin. It was a summer camp for 1 or 2 weeks. Joe Morella, the drummer with Dave Brubeck, he was there, and a couple
Mm-hmm.
other people that I didn't know. And I had my volume one, blue record and book, and I took some black, the book, I took some to sell. And I'd never done a camp before,
Mm-hmm.
but I realized in doing that I was talking and teaching differently than the other people. They were kind of promoting themselves and their records or whatever. And I was trying to get the kids to play their scales and improvise. So that would be in about 1967. And that's right, I'd already been teaching at a big band camp, but this was a smaller camp. So I got into teaching and then I started doing separate clinics by myself where I'd go out and make sure they have a record player,
Mm-hmm.
put the record player on, have the kids playing. That's back when I printed a bunch of pieces of paper with the 12 major scales, 12 Dorian minor, 12 dominant
Mm-hmm.
seventh, etc. I think the scale thing, along the way, a lot of educators thought that me encouraging people to improvise on scales and chords as a beginning place, I think a lot of people, educators, thought that was not the way to do it. They were used to teaching the blues
Mm-hmm.
and the blues scale
Right.
as the first vehicle for people learning to play. But I didn't. For trumpets and saxes and clarinets and even trombones, they weren't used to playing the blues scale. They were used to playing scales that had whole and half steps, major scales, minor scales, dominant seventh scales, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
But the blues scale had a couple of minor third intervals in it, and they hadn't used to listen to that sound. They weren't used to listening to it. I remember going to New York in the 60s to Manny's Music. It was a Saturday afternoon, and kids were in there, and adults trying instruments. Over there were trumpets, over here were saxes, and the saxes and the trumpets were playing scales. Hang on. Oh, okay. The trumpets and the saxes were going up and down scales. The guitar players were playing the blues scale, up the blues scale, down the blues scale. They weren't practicing major and minor scales like the trumpets and the saxes. And I thought it was very interesting that the guitars were quicker to get into improvising by way of the blues scale and the configurations on the fingerboard
Mm-hmm.
than the trumpets and the sax. So when I started, I didn't start with the blues. I started with 3 Dorian minor scales, and I worked those. And then we gradually moved into the blues in my first book, and the 2-5-1s and other things. So
Yeah.
I
Right.
kind of evolved. Pardon me.
I think the first book, if I'm not mistaken, is the one where you're 8 bars on C minor, then 8 bars on the next chord.
It was F minor,
Or
8 bars of F minor, 8 bars of E flat minor, eight
right.
bars of D minor. Because when you took those 3 concert scales and transposed them for trumpets and saxes, it gave them pretty good scales, easy to
Mm-hmm.
play.
Mm-hmm.
And we stayed there. So I figured if they could play across that and keep their place, moving from 8 bars to the next 8 bars to the next 8 bars and improvise,
Mm-hmm.
that would be a good way to start. And it caught on.
Yeah. So, will there be a next book, or what's the most recent project that you're working on, or that you're interested to do? Or
Well, the project that we're doing right now, and we've been doing for several years, is streaming all of the tracks. There's about 2,000 tracks. And you go on our site, jazzbooks.com. Just go to jazzbooks.com and it says streaming. And I think it's $5 US a month or $50 for a year. And it's got access to 2,000 tracks. And you can put it on your phone, put it on your iPad, put it on your computer, run it through your speakers and so forth. And it works very well. And we have a lot of people using it. And then we still got, our jazz site, jazzbooks.com, which sells several thousand jazz items and so forth. And that's about where we're working on right now. And we're also working on updating the streaming site to add things to it. That's what we're doing right now. And selling jazz all over the world.
Yeah, so you're really up to date, because it's these days sometimes even difficult to find a CD player. In modern cars they don't have one.
Right.
And so the streaming is definitely
many people.
Yeah.
Oh, streaming and the pitch control and the tempo control.
Yeah.
We've got them organized, but we're also working. Another company is working to make our streaming site better and easier to use. Yeah.
Nice.
So it's a big addition.
Yeah.
Of course. Let's talk about something else just for a minute. And that is the fact that streaming and buying tracks to have young people who haven't really heard jazz, to introduce them to jazz, and buying one track at a time of one track of John Coltrane, one track of Miles Davis, one track of Sonny Rollins. I think all of us older musicians who have a collection of LPs like I do, thousands, and CDs, I think we all feel that buying the actual album, all 8 tracks, all 15 tracks, and listening to it from the first track to the last track is extremely important. And it's having an effect on the students. And the effect it's having is the students, they can't memorize the melody. And they only know certain tunes. Does that make sense? They rarely listen to the whole tune.
To the whole thing.
They listen to the... I heard a story the other day that when the Beatles made one of their records, that they got together and listened they spent 60 hours deciding which tune on the album would be the first tune and the second tune and the third tune and the fourth tune. In other words, the placement of the tunes took the listener's ears on a musical journey from point A to point X or whatever.
Yeah,
but they don't do that to students. Yeah. So streaming is good in a way, but it's not good.
Yeah, everything changed. I mean, it's like with the movies. The young today's movies, they are cut so quickly from one scene to the next. It's not like an old timer, you can enjoy and watching from developing a story over more time, like with the music too. So I think,
they started that with ads on TV many, many years ago. They would have something and it would attract my attention, but then it's gone. And then there would be another that attract my attention and it's gone. And I told my wife, this has probably been 20 years ago, 30 years ago. I said, boy, I don't like that. What's wrong with just staying there for at least a second instead of a millisecond and going on to something else. Boom, boom, boom.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Yeah, but oh well. I still really enjoy teaching.
That's good to hear.
Yeah, and doing clinics and things. I've got some things lined up, and we have quite a few jobs lined up where we just go and play. Say they're trying to raise money for cancer, and they have a once-a-year banquet, and people are paying money. It's a fundraiser, and we go in and we'll play for 2 hours at the beginning while they're having their reception, and then maybe we'll play while they eat, and then we leave. But I pay the musicians to do that just to play jazz and to let people, especially older adults, hear this music and all these thousands of tunes that I grew up listening to.
Any plans for Switzerland?
And
are you coming over here?
What's that?
Any plans for Switzerland?
I don't think so. No, I want to show you something. Here's a list of tunes.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see.
Yeah, continue.
Now, this list is in the Red Book, the Jazz Handbook,
Mm-hmm.
and this is a list I always take with me when we play.
Mm-hmm.
We've got a 3-hour jazz concert about 50 miles from here at a resort on Saturday from 1 to 4. And those, I'll have that on the stand, and that's the tunes we'll pick from. And I think the musicians, they already have them all memorized. Here's another one. We played this concert almost 2 weeks ago. But these are older tunes. Mr. Sandman, Goofus.
But I guess you're not playing all of them, right? Otherwise, it would be a 5-set gig.
Do what?
You don't play all of them, right? It will be a very long
No.
gig.
Yes. Yes,
You're
it
playing
would be.
20 choruses of solo each.
No 20 choruses. I have once or twice I played a concert where we'll play 4 or 5 or 6, 7 songs in a row. Just play the melody, and then have a segue into the next tune. Just play the melody. Just play the melody. These are for older people, and they enjoy hearing the melody. No improvisation, but it brings back memories.
A nice
from when they were
concept, yeah.
growing up.
Just play the melody and
Yeah.
then move on to the next song. So even more people
This
can.
particular concert here, we played at a local park, and there was like about 175 people there in their lawn chairs. And when I took the job, she said, "Now, Jamie, these are older people. Most of them are 50 to 70 years old." And I told her, I said, "Well, I'm 83, so I'll probably know some tunes that they don't even know." But I got there, and when I started, I said, "Okay, how many of you have heard of this song?" And a few hands went up. Then I said, "How many of you have heard of this song? How many of you have heard of Mr. Sandman?" More hands went up. Then I realized right away that these really old tunes that I had written out here were too old for them. They didn't know the songs. So we played other songs. We ended up playing. We did play Mr. Sandman. Yeah. Certain tunes they like to hear are Body and Soul, Misty, Satin Doll, Take the A Train. Our drummer, Jonathan Higgins, who's on a lot of the play-along records, when he was 13 years old, he got to play several tunes with the Duke Ellington Orchestra in the town that he grew up in, which is Lexington, Kentucky. Duke Ellington heard he was a drummer, and he came up and played. I was at that concert. It was at a country club. Me and my friend had driven down 75 miles to Lexington, Kentucky, to hear Duke Ellington. We'd heard he was there. And we're standing right in front of the band, and all these people are dancing. But I guess we must have left at the intermission, and my friend Jonathan Higgins came up after the intermission and played a couple songs. Now, if I'd been there for that, I don't know what I would have thought, especially if they announced that this kid was 13 years old. And me and my friend were probably 16 because we could drive, Interesting. So whenever we're playing for adults who have heard of Duke Ellington, I always introduce Jonathan and make a big deal of the fact that when he was a kid, he played with Duke Ellington. And Duke wanted to take him on the road. 13-year-old boy out with all of those people that drank. And who knows what else they did. Yeah. He'll be playing with me Saturday. And Tyrone Wheeler's on a lot of the play-along records, the bass player, and he'll be playing with me Saturday too. So we've been playing together for 30, 40, 50 years.
Is that a steady gig you have on Saturday at that place that you play?
Say that again.
Is that a steady gig that you play every Saturday at that place?
No. It's once a year. Once a year.
Oh, well, it's steady too.
Now, yeah, that's steady. Yeah, you just have to be. You have to make sure you're alive next year, and you can
show up.
Play.
Yeah. My last kind of question is, it just came to my mind that I'm interested to know, when you did the project, like a new play along, a new book. There's always a written section playing, or I'm not familiar with the newest material, but do you choose the people who are recording that stuff, or how does that happen? Is it? I mean, who plays the drums? Who plays the bass? Who plays the piano for that particular project? Is it up to you to decide?
They all play at the same time.
Yeah, but
Or
who is going to play? Is it Bruce Barth on the piano, or is it someone else playing the piano?
who's going to play? I don't think I understand the question.
Like I thought there are some books and play-alongs where other people play than yourself. Like there's a bass player, a drummer, but who is going to play?
Do you mean the separation of the instruments
Know
on
the
the play
names of the
along?
musicians, the guys who will record it.
Oh, okay. So what's the question? The names are on the play alongs
Right, but you're
in the
choosing the
booklet.
musicians that you would like to hear doing those jobs, or
Oh, yes, but I tell you, a lot of them were traveling through town.
uh-huh.
They would be playing a job in Cincinnati or Indianapolis, or maybe they would play for the Louisville Jazz Society, where I live.
Hmm.
Kentucky and Indiana are right together. I'm in Indiana, but I'm on the Ohio River, which is a big river.
Hmm.
And on the other side is a big town called Louisville, Kentucky. So we had the Louisville Jazz Society, and I was booking talent for that group for many years. So if I knew they were coming into town, I would say, okay, the concert's on Monday. Would you want to come over here Tuesday morning to my basement and do a play along record? And they said, yeah, it's an extra job. That's how I picked many of the people.
Okay, interesting.
So I thought for some of the piano players, they kind of struggled at first because they weren't used to just comping and nobody soloing.
Hmm.
Does that make sense?
Hmm.
So when that would happen, I would take my microphone over at my desk and very silently, very quietly through their headphones be scat singing. Beep boop boody, beep bop boody, boodly doodly doodly, dee da biddly da, bop boop boody da doodly doody. And that made the piano player feel more comfortable. I don't think it ever bothered the bass or the drums. Sometimes the drums might get too busy, and I would say, "Oops, watch, don't be too busy. Just keep time. You know, remember, the student's going to be playing with this." Oftentimes, the musicians, would gradually build the track from the beginning to the end, in excitement,
Yeah, I
and
like the
volume and
development of
intensity.
a lot of those tracks. I like the development. It starts kind
Yes,
of loose and one chord more
yeah,
there. It's
yeah.
nicely done. Yeah.
And sometimes they would rush, go faster, and that wasn't good. So sometimes if I caught it rushing, we'd have to do it again.
Hmm.
And then I took probably 6 or 7 or 8 records, volumes, about 6, 7, 8 years ago, and had Gene Perla slow the tempos down. In other words, if the tune sped up, let me see, if the tune sped up, got faster,
Hmm.
we got it so it would just stay the same tempo throughout,
Hmm.
and that was very good. Several rhythm sections, piano, bass, and drums, tend to rush. So I took
But
those and made them go
still better than to
even.
drag. But yeah, I see
Yeah,
you slowed
you're
them
right.
down. Hmm.
Yeah,
Hmm.
much better than dragging. Yeah, if they drag, it makes everybody feel like we're dying. We're getting slower and slower and slower.
Yeah.
So it's better to rush. It's got excitement, but when you're using it for a play along, you almost feel like you're trying to catch up with the rhythm section.
Yeah, right.
So I think we've corrected that problem.
Hmm. Oh, nice. I didn't know that.
And something we haven't talked about, and that's the fact that early on my very early play alongs, we didn't have transposed parts.
Hmm.
Well, this is a weird
Was
one.
all in C, the whole book in C, and that's it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Everything was in Z.
I like that.
Of course, if
You have to
yeah,
do it by yourself.
yeah, and the horn players were supposed to transpose,
Hmm.
but I quickly found out when band directors took this into their bands with young kids, they didn't know how to transpose,
Cool.
and it stopped them from even trying. So I had to eventually
Hmm.
do the transpose part. And now, of course, every book has 4 sections: bass clef, treble clef, bass clef, B flat, and E flat.
It's like that.
The only thing it doesn't cover is F horn, French horn.
Hmm. Yeah, so I guess it has to do with the small kids. They are. It's too early for them to transpose already. But
Right.
for later, it's great to have just the C chart.
Something else I did. Let me get a book here. Something that I reluctantly did way, way back there was to write in the scales and darken in the card tones to the books. You know, I didn't really want to do that. That's the melody. Because I still wanted the student to memorize the chord progressions.
Yeah, I clearly remember all those things.
But I just, I just couldn't do it. So I eventually gave in and decided especially on the beginning books, to write the scale in whole notes and darken in the card tones 1, 3, 5, 7. So that way the students got the so all the scales they need are written out, and the darkened tones are the card tones.
I think
And
it's
then,
great. I think it's great to have it like that. I mean, visually too, you know.
yeah, it makes sense to me. But then you have to get to the point where once you're playing and you do it for a little while, then you shut the books because if it's going to be any good to you, you have to memorize it. You have to memorize. You want to memorize the melody to the tune and the harmonic progression.
Sure, but
and each scale and each
sure, but for example, in
internalize
my case, I'm very visual, so I need to see it too, in a way.
it. Yeah.
But you can close the book and you can still see the dots on the lines. Kind of, you remember it too.
Yeah.
I think it's a nice thing, not just to hear them, but also to know how they look like.
Well, I also suggest that let's say people have this volume 54 and they're going to play Summertime or they're going to play Satin Doll or whatever else is in there. I strongly suggest that during the day or in their car when they're driving, that they put the CD on and just listen to the harmony. Listen to the bass, listen to the comping of the piano and the drums, and get the form together. If it's a blues, it's 3 4-bar phrases for a total of 12. And count how many choruses and see if you can sing the roots to the different chords while you're driving and so forth. There's a lot of there's a lot that you can do away from your instrument that helps you prepare for when you pick up your instrument and start to practice, to make your practice time more valuable and useful.
Yeah.
I've always suggested that the music is up here. It's the instrument that is the problem. So if you feel like you can't improvise, you're wrong. You can improvise. It's just that you can't play the ideas in your mind on your instrument. So you need to practice more. You need a good teacher. Maybe you need a better instrument. Maybe you need to change the instrument. Maybe you're not supposed to play trumpet. Maybe you should be playing clarinet. Who knows?
Right. Yeah. I really enjoyed talking to you, Jamie.
Well, I enjoyed talking to you.
It was.
I'm sorry it took a while to get the audio going.
Well, it's
finally got it.
No problem at all. Yeah.
Okay. If anybody has any, if anybody watching this has any questions, they can just write me, Jamey, Jamey, email me, jamey@jazzbooks.com. Simple.
Very good to know.
Oops.
Or call.
That's our website there. But if you just email me, Jamey, Jamey, @jazzbooks.com, I'll answer you. I always look forward to hearing from people.
Good to know. Yeah, we'll do that. Yeah.
I wonder if I can turn this thing off.
I will do it for you. Don't worry. I think it's lunchtime for you, huh? Almost.
Okay. Yes, it is. All right. Yeah. I'll see you.
Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Jimmy. Have a nice one.
All right. Same to you. Bye bye.